Hello, everybody. We are going to pick up in the middle of chapter 7 where we left off. Now, I just want to remind you, chapter 7 is an interesting chapter because it goes back and forth from the present day where Stanley is at the camp in the middle of digging his first hole, and it flashes back to the story of his great-great-grandfather who is believed to have caused a family curse. So we are here on page 31, and we're going to start up where Stanley is digging his hole. Stanley was still digging. His hole was about 3 feet deep, but only in the center. It sloped upward to the edges. The sun had only just come up over the horizon, but he already could feel its hot rays against his face. As he reached down to pick up his canteen, he felt a sudden rush of dizziness and put his hands on his knees to steady himself. For a moment he was afraid he would throw up, but the moment passed. He drank the last drop of water from his canteen. He had blisters on every one of his fingers, and one in the center of each palm. Everyone else's hole was a lot deeper than his. He couldn't actually see their holes, but could tell by the size of their dirt piles. He saw a cloud of dust moving across the wasteland, and noticed that the other boys had stopped digging and were watching it too. The dirt cloud moved closer, and he could see that it trailed behind a red pickup truck. The truck stopped near where they were digging, and the boys lined up behind it. X-ray in front, Zero at the rear. Stanley got in line behind Zero. Mr. Sir filled each of their canteens from a tank of water in the bed of the pickup. As he took Stanley's canteen from him, he said, "This isn't the Girl Scouts, is it?" Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. Mr. Sir followed Stanley back to his hole to see how he was doing. "You better get with it," he said, "or else you're going to be digging in the hottest part of the day." He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth, deftly removed the shells with his teeth, and spat them into Stanley's hole. Now, the author is going to do a flashback back to Stanley's great-great-grandfather, Elia. Every day, Elia carried the little piglet up the mountain and sang to it as it drank from the stream. As the pig grew fatter, Elia grew stronger. On the day of Myra's 15th birthday, Elia's pig weighed over 50 stones. Madame Zeroni had told him to carry the pig up the mountain on that day as well, but Elia didn't want to present himself to Myra smelling like a pig. Instead, he took a bath. It was his second bath in less than a week. Then he led the pig to Myra's. Igor Barkov was there with his pig as well. "These are the 2 finest pigs I've ever seen," Myra's father declared. He was also impressed with Elia, who seemed to have grown bigger and stronger in the last 2 months. "I used to think you were a good-for-nothing book reader," he said, "but I see now you could be an excellent mud wrestler." "May I marry your daughter?" Elia boldly asked. "First, I must weigh the pigs." Alas, poor Elia should have carried his pig up the mountain one last time. The 2 pigs weighed exactly the same. And now the author is going to flash forward to the present day with Stanley. Stanley's blisters had ripped open and new blisters formed. He kept changing his grip on the shovel to try to avoid the pain. Finally, he removed his cap and held it between the shaft of his shovel and his raw hands. This helped, but digging was harder because the cap would slip and slide. The sun beat down on his unprotected head and neck. Though he tried to convince himself otherwise, he'd been aware for a while that his piles of dirt were too close to his hole. The piles were outside his 5-foot circle, but he could see he was going to run out of room. Still, he pretended otherwise and kept adding more dirt to the piles that he would eventually have to move. The problem was that when the dirt was in the ground, it was compacted. It expanded when it was excavated. The piles were a lot bigger than his hole was deep. It was either now or later. Reluctantly, he climbed up out of his hole and once again dug his shovel into his previously dug dirt. Now we're going to flash back to Elia and Myra, who is Stanley's great-great-grandfather. Myra's father got down on his hands and knees and closely examined each pig, tail to snout. "Those are the two of the finest pigs I have ever seen," he said at last. "How am I to decide? I have only one daughter." "Why not let Myra decide?" suggested Elia. "That's preposterous!" exclaimed Igor, expelling saliva as he spoke. "Myra's just an empty-headed girl," said her father. "How could she possibly decide, when her father can't?" "She knows how she feels in her heart," said Elia. Myra's father rubbed his chin. Then he laughed and said, "Why not?" He slapped Elia on the back. "It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig." He summoned his daughter. Elia blushed when Myra entered the room. "Good afternoon, Myra," he said. She looked at him. "You're Elia, right?" she asked. "Myra," said her father, "Elia and Igor have each offered a pig for your hand in marriage. It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig. So I will let you make the choice. Whom do you wish to marry?" Myra looked confused. "You want me to decide?" "That's right, my blossom," said her father. "Gee, I don't know," said Myra. "Which pig weighs more?" "They both weigh the same," said her father. "Golly," said Myra, "I guess I'd choose Elia." "No, Igor." "No, Elia." "No, Igor." "Oh, I know. I'll think of a number between 1 and 10. I'll marry whoever guesses the closest number. Okay, I'm ready." 10, guessed Igor. Elia said nothing. "Elia," said Myra, "what number do you guess?" Elia didn't pick a number. "Marry Igor," he muttered. "You can keep my pig as a wedding present." And now the author is going to flash forward to the present day, and we're with Stanley. The next time the water truck came, it was driven by Mr. Pendanski, who also brought sack lunches. Stanley sat with his back against a pile of dirt and ate. He had a bologna sandwich, potato chips, and a large chocolate chip cookie. "How you doing?" asked Magnet. "Not real good," said Stanley. "Well, the first hole's the hardest," Magnet said. Stanley took a long, deep breath. He couldn't afford to dawdle. He was way behind the others, and the sun just kept getting hotter. It wasn't even noon yet, but he didn't know if he had the strength to stand up. He thought about quitting. He wondered what they would do to him. What could they do to him? His clothes were soaked with sweat. In school, he had learned that sweating was good for you. It was nature's way of keeping you cool. So why was he so hot? Okay, I'm going to stop there, and we're going to finish this chapter in the next video.